They used to say that some people were born ordinary, and some were born marked by something unseen. Elowen Virelle had spent most of her life trying to decide which one she was, though deep down, she had always known the answer. She was not ordinary. She had never been, and the world had made sure she understood that early enough. Elowen did not remember a time when silence was truly silent. Even as a child, there had always been something beneath it, something subtle but impossible to ignore. At first, she thought it was imagination, the way children create invisible companions or whisper to shadows. But this was different. This had rhythm. This had weight. This had truth. She heard heartbeats. Not the simple biological pulse that kept a person alive, but something deeper, something layered beneath flesh and bone. Every heartbeat carried emotion, intention, and sometimes even secrets that words refused to reveal. To Elowen, people were not defined by what they said, but by the sound their hearts made when they believed no one was listening. Fear trembled like uneven echoes, fragile and unsteady. Joy moved lightly, almost musical, rising and falling with a quiet warmth. Love, when it was real, was the most beautiful sound she had ever known, steady, full, and deeply anchored. But not all sounds were gentle. Lies fractured into sharp, irregular pulses, brittle and uneasy. And betrayal. Betrayal was chaos, loud and overwhelming, impossible to ignore even if she wanted to. She learned the truth of her ability on a night that divided her life into before and after. Her father had been sitting across from her at the dinner table, his expression calm, his voice steady as he spoke about nothing in particular. Her mother laughed softly beside him, her presence warm, familiar, safe. It was an ordinary evening by every visible measure, the kind that fades into memory without leaving a mark. But Elowen had not been watching their faces. She had been listening. Her father's heartbeat did not match the moment. It was uneven, strained, carrying something heavy and hidden. There was hesitation in it, a quiet resistance, as though his heart already knew what his voice refused to say. She did not understand it then, not fully, but she felt the wrongness of it settle deep inside her chest. That night he left. No argument. No warning. No explanation that made sense. Just absence. Elowen never forgot the sound his heart had made before he walked away. It taught her something that no one else ever needed to explain. People did not leave suddenly. Their hearts left first. Their bodies simply followed. From that moment forward, Elowen stopped trusting what she saw. She stopped believing in the comfort of appearances, because she knew how easily they could lie. Instead, she listened. She paid attention to what people tried to hide, and in doing so, she began to understand them in ways they never intended. Understanding, however, did not bring comfort. It brought distance. By the time she reached her early 20s, Elowen had built her life around careful separation. She did not isolate herself entirely, but she kept just enough space between herself and others to avoid the inevitable disappointment that always seemed to follow closeness. It was not loneliness that shaped her choices, but caution. She worked in a small bookstore tucked between two aging buildings on a quiet street that most people passed without noticing. It was the kind of place that existed outside the rush of the modern world, where time moved more slowly and conversations were softer. Books lined every wall, their pages filled with stories that, unlike real life, followed patterns and conclusions that made sense. In stories, love could be trusted. In reality, it could not. Customers came and went, their presence marked by the steady hum of their inner rhythms. Elowen rarely needed to look at them to understand what they carried. A man buying flowers might sound heavy with guilt rather than affection. A woman laughing with a friend might carry the sharp edge of envy beneath her voice. Even the quiet ones, the ones who seemed unremarkable, often revealed more than they intended. Occasionally, she heard something rare. A genuine warmth. A steady, unwavering rhythm that spoke of real care, real connection. Those moments were the most dangerous, because they tempted her to believe that something genuine could last. Experience had taught her otherwise. No heartbeat stayed the same forever. That understanding became the foundation of her life. She did not chase connections. She did not invest in promises. She existed in the space between observation and participation, close enough to function, distant enough to remain unaffected. Or at least, that was what she believed. Everything changed on a day that began like any other. Rain fell steadily from the early hours of the morning, turning the streets into blurred reflections of gray and silver. The sound of it against the windows created a quiet, steady backdrop that most would find soothing. For Elowen, it simply added another layer to the silence she had learned to navigate. The bookstore was nearly empty, as it often was during heavy weather. She moved between shelves with practiced ease, organizing, adjusting, maintaining order in a space that rarely demanded urgency. It was a routine she found comfort in, a predictable rhythm that did not challenge her control. The bell above the door rang. It was a soft sound, barely noticeable, but it marked the entrance of someone new. Elowen did not look up immediately. She did not need to. She always heard people before she saw them. Except this time, she didn't. At first, she thought she had simply missed it, that the noise of the rain had masked the sound. But as the seconds passed, the absence became impossible to ignore. There was nothing. No rhythm. No emotional undercurrent. No presence beneath the physical. Her hands stilled where they rested on the spine of a book. A slow, unfamiliar tension crept through her chest as she turned toward the door. He stood just inside, water clinging to the edges of his coat, dark hair slightly damp from the rain. There was nothing outwardly remarkable about him at first glance, nothing that demanded attention in the way some people naturally did. And yet, something about him felt controlled. Too controlled. His posture was precise, his movements measured, as though every action had been considered before it was made. His gaze moved across the room with quiet awareness, not searching aimlessly, but observing. Elowen focused. She listened carefully, pushing past the surface, reaching for the familiar patterns she had relied on her entire life. There was still nothing. The realization settled heavily in her mind, not with panic, but with a sharp, disorienting clarity. This was not normal. This had never happened before. Every person had a heartbeat she could hear, no matter how faint, no matter how distant. It was the one constant she had always depended on. Until now. He began to move through the store, his steps quiet but deliberate. Elowen watched him without meaning to, her attention fixed in a way she could not easily dismiss. She tried again to listen, to find something, anything that would restore the sense of order she had just lost. Silence. It was not just the absence of sound. It was the absence of presence. When he approached the counter, she forced herself to remain still, to appear unaffected. Her control had always been one of her greatest strengths, and she was not about to lose it now. "Do you have anything on old folklore?" he asked. His voice was calm, even, carrying no immediate emotion that she could grasp. Without her ability, she had nothing to anchor her understanding of him, and that unsettled her more than she wanted to admit. She gestured toward a shelf behind him. Third row. Left side. He did not move immediately. Instead, he looked at her. Not casually. Not briefly. Intentionally. It was the kind of look that suggested recognition, though she was certain they had never met before. "You don't like people," he said. The statement was simple, delivered without accusation or curiosity, as though it were an obvious observation rather than a personal conclusion. Elowen met his gaze evenly. "That's a strange thing to say to someone you just met." "It's an accurate one." There was no hesitation in his response. No shift in tone. No sign that he doubted his own words. Under normal circumstances, she would have listened for the truth behind what he said. She would have measured the consistency of his heartbeat, tested the authenticity of his confidence. But now, she had nothing. "How would you know that?" she asked. He tilted his head slightly, considering her in a way that felt far too deliberate. "Because you're watching me like I don't fit into something you understand." The words landed more precisely than she expected. For a moment, she said nothing, not because she lacked a response, but because she did not like how easily he had reached that conclusion. He turned away then, moving toward the section she had indicated. The conversation ended as quickly as it had begun, but the effect of it lingered. Elowen tried to return to her routine, to refocus on the small, manageable tasks that had always kept her grounded. But her attention refused to settle. Every movement he made drew her awareness back to him, not because of what he did, but because of what she could not perceive. He remained in the store longer than most customers, moving slowly through the shelves, selecting and returning books with careful consideration. There was purpose in it, though she could not determine what that purpose was. When he finally returned to the counter, he held a single book in his hand. It was an older title, one that had been moved to the back shelves over time, its relevance fading with each passing year. It dealt with myths, forgotten histories, and abilities that existed only in stories most people no longer believed. Elowen's attention sharpened. "Why that one?" she asked. He glanced down at the book briefly before answering. "Because some stories are closer to the truth than people think." There was something in the way he said it that unsettled her, not because of the words themselves, but because of the quiet certainty behind them. "That's not how most people see it," she replied. "Most people don't look very closely." The response came easily, as though it required no thought at all. Elowen's fingers rested lightly against the edge of the counter. She felt a subtle shift in her own breathing, a slight increase in her heartbeat that she immediately recognized. For the first time since he had entered the store, she was aware not of his silence, but of her own reaction to it. He stepped a little closer, not invading her space, but close enough to alter the atmosphere between them. "What if the things people dismiss are the only things that actually matter?" he asked. The question lingered, not demanding an answer, but leaving no room for dismissal. Elowen held his gaze, searching for something she could use to ground the moment. But there was still nothing. No rhythm. No emotional signal. Just the steady, unbroken absence that had defined him from the moment he arrived. "You speak like someone who already knows the answer," she said. A faint shift crossed his expression, subtle enough that most would have missed it. "Maybe I do." The simplicity of it made it more unsettling, not less. He placed the book on the counter, and she processed the purchase without speaking further. The routine felt mechanical, distant, as though she were performing actions she had completed countless times before without fully engaging with them. When he turned to leave, the sense of imbalance remained. He paused at the door, his hand resting briefly against the frame as the rain continued to fall beyond it. "You should be careful," he said. Elowen's attention snapped back to him. Careful of what? He did not turn immediately. When he did, his expression was calm, but there was something beneath it, something sharper, more deliberate. "Not everything you rely on is as certain as you think." The words struck deeper than she expected, not because they were aggressive, but because they challenged something she had never questioned. "My understanding has never been wrong," she replied. It was the closest thing to certainty she allowed herself. He studied her for a moment longer, as though weighing something she could not see. "Then this will be the first time." There was no arrogance in the statement. No attempt to provoke. Just a quiet, undeniable confidence. Before she could respond, he stepped out into the rain and was gone. The silence that followed felt different. Not empty. Unsettled. Elowen remained where she was, her thoughts moving in directions she had never needed to consider before. For years, her ability had been the one constant in a world she did not fully trust. It had guided her, protected her, given her a way to navigate the complexity of human behavior without relying on guesswork. Now, for the first time, that certainty had been disrupted. Not by failure, but by absence. She listened again, instinctively, as though expecting the world to correct itself. The familiar rhythms of distant passers-by returned, faint but present, reminding her that nothing else had changed. Except him. And the fact that she could not explain it. That night, sleep did not come easily. When it did, it was shallow, interrupted by fragments of thought that refused to settle into rest. Every moment of the day replayed in her mind, each detail examined with a precision she rarely applied to anything outside her immediate understanding. Who was he? More importantly, what was he? The questions did not feel dramatic or exaggerated. They felt necessary. Because something about him did not fit into the world she knew. And if there was one thing Elowen had learned to trust above all else, it was the moment when something did not make sense. Those moments always meant one thing. Change was coming. Whether she was ready for it or not. And for the first time in a long time, Elowen Virelle found herself standing at the edge of something she could not predict, could not control, and could not yet understand. Which meant one simple, undeniable truth. Her life, as she knew it, had already begun to shift. She just hadn't seen how far it would go.